This is the Dr. A Show with your host, Dr. Will Aguila.
Hi, this is Dr. A. This show is meant to inspire you to make positive changes in your life. I bring you experts in the fields related to nutrition, fitness, self-help, and wellness. From learning how to keep your kids safe from predators, to the latest weight loss programs that keep you fit, and to inspirational stories about people who have overcome great odds. Here you will find great information that you can really use. The Dr. A Show is the 1 hour of radio that you don't want to miss. Today we have an expert on post-traumatic stress disorder who will explain how childhood emotional pain will impact you on adult relationships. And on the second half of the show, we'll meet an author who says he knows what it is that women want, and he has the science to back it up. All this today on the Dr. A Show. Our parents yelled, raged, and passed out in front of us, and we stood there frozen in fear like deer in headlights, revved up for fight or flight, but unable to move a muscle. This is what an adult child of alcoholic parents remembers. Today I wanted to bring in this topic since it affects so many people. Many of you out there listening are affected or have been a part of this syndrome. We're talking about the trauma of living with an alcoholic parent or spouse. The statistics are startling. 1 out of 4 children is a child of an addict. 55% of all family violence occurs in alcoholic-addicted homes. Alcohol is a factor in 90% of all child abuse cases. And 70% of adult children of alcoholics develop patterns of compulsive behavior such as alcohol, drugs, food, sex, work, gambling, or even spending. To help us understand why this happens is author and expert in post-traumatic stress disorder, Dr. Tian Dayton. Dr. Dayton is a clinical psychologist and is board-certified in psychodrama. She is the director of the New York Psychodrama Training Institute, where she runs training groups in psychodrama, sociometry, and experiential group therapy. Dr. Dayton has been a guest expert on NBC, CNN, and MSNBC, Montel, Ricky Lake, John Walsh, and Geraldo. Dr. Dayton, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now tell me, what do the letters ACOA mean?
They mean adult child of an alcoholic or addict. Essentially, that is someone who grew up with addiction and is experiencing the effects of it in adulthood. As opposed to
adult children. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. That so adult children of alcoholics often suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
They do. It's the nature of trauma is that the brain and body don't necessarily process it at the time it's occurring, and childhood is an easy time to become traumatized because of the power imbalance in the child's dependency and their developmental stage.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that. Yeah.
Well, kids are really, as we know, they're completely dependent upon their parents for survival. Not to sound overly dramatic, but that's really the size of it. So that kids whose parents are out of control with a drug, with alcohol or with, extreme dysfunction of some kind, kids become traumatized by scary parents in general. We all, as parents, know that if we lose it, we frighten our children. So imagine a small child in a home where the parent is basically constantly losing it and not doing anything to repair that, because most addicts won't sober up fast enough to say, oh, I just lost it, let's sit down and talk about it, let me make you So that means that the trauma doesn't get right-sized. The child gets frightened, and the person they would normally go to in order to right-size their fear and have it explained to them what was scaring them is the one who's scaring them. So that's a double whammy for a small child. And it means that they have nowhere safe to go to process that fear, so they hold on to it. They oftentimes dissociate. Little kids find a way to stay in the situation physically, but psychologically and emotionally they freeze or they leave. They just sort of disappear on the inside. They shut down. And the longer you spend in that kind of a freeze state as a child, the more likely you are to become symptomatic as an adult, because the pain really goes underground.
So they don't necessarily become desensitized.
How do you mean? They
become numb.
Yeah.
They become numb to the repeated attacks and the repeated fear.
Yeah.
So that's just they're associating at the moment those feelings. They're really...
But you're right. They don't. So often we think, kids are resilient. They don't feel it that much. What appears to be, that's sort of the catch-22. In a way, that's correct because they're not feeling it. But what they're doing is not processing it, and their body's holding on to the sensorial input. A lot of times in therapy, when I start to wake up that side of, when a person starts to wake up in that side of them, they'll remember fragments of experience, fragments of sensorial, the smell, the sight or two. They'll remember the touch of something, the sound. The sound will scare them and trigger a PTSD reaction. In group therapy, oftentimes tension in the group will be triggering for a child who's grown up like this. And then if you can kind of slow it down and help them feel safe enough, you can start to talk about what's getting triggered for you. Why is the tension so scary for you now? And that way, the thinking mind, which shuts down at a moment of fear and gives way to the limbic system, which is what collects sensorial input, why we have all these images, starts to wake up again, and the adult mind makes sense of the childhood experience.
I think this is important because perhaps even some people listening have experienced this, and they felt that they have suppressed these feelings. So my question is, if you have suppressed these feelings, is it better just leave them there?
That's a really good question, because you do feel like you're waking a sleeping tiger when you start to deal with them. But, if they stayed out of mind and they didn't interfere with your life, it would be okay. But oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes they get projected onto your current relationship. And they manifest in the form of an overreaction, maybe. And maybe you're overly dependent. Maybe you're overly easily triggered into anger. Maybe you're easily triggered into anxiety. And if you have trouble right-sizing your emotional reactions to your spouse or your children, that's oftentimes where these triggers happen, or at work with authority.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The situation that mirrors the situation that caused the trauma to begin with triggers it in adulthood. But we don't know what's happening, So we think it's what's triggering it that's what's bothering us. But in fact, it's often just being triggered. It's old pain being triggered by a new situation.
Exactly. Now tell us about some of these statistics that are associated with children of addicts, because I that some of those behaviors are related to that. First of all, one out of four children is the child of an addict. 1 out of 4, and that's a conservative statistic, actually. That's people reporting addiction and probably even treating it, because that's the way data like that is collected. And think of all the children we all know, people listening who are living with addiction, and no one's talking about it, no one's reporting it, nothing like that. Wow. So that's one of the statistics. Now, incest is twice as likely to occur among sons and daughters of alcoholics and addicts. Yeah,
that's very well. That too makes complete sense when you think about it, because drinking and drugging lower the governors of any person. It affects your thinking mind so that your choices are poorer, your reaction time is slower, and you're not thinking clearly. And you do things that are impulsive. And the limbic system, which is our system that governs the fight-flight, and it's in charge of appetite, sleep cycles, libido, mood, that goes into high alert when you're in a trauma state. So the person, and when you're drunk, your limbic system is more activated, so that a father who might be attracted to a daughter might be less likely to be able to control that. Or a mother who's disturbed and angry might be less likely to be able to control berating or hitting.
Well, we'll talk about a little bit more of that when we come back from the break. A childhood in pain and a crossroads later in life. Which path would you take? Stay tuned to the Dr. A Show with our guest, Dr. Tian Dayton, author of the Acoa Trauma Syndrome, The Impact of Childhood Pain on Adult Relationships, when the Dr. A Show continues.
And now, back to the Dr. A Show with your host, Dr. Will Aguila.
Welcome back to the show. Our guest is Dr. Tian Dayton, author of the Acoa Trauma Syndrome, The Impact of Childhood Pain on Adult Relationships. We've been talking about how a painful childhood later on affects an adult relationship and what you can do about it. Dr. Dayton, what is the impact of childhood trauma on future marriage when you're an adult?
You know, the people that I treat have a harder time both with intimacy. Let's say intimacy becomes more triggering. Dependency, it can be triggering, so people don't want to feel dependent because it brings up too many fears of loss. They can be, there you see, so the biggest thing I see is black and white thinking, feeling, and behavior. If somebody moves from shutdown to high intense emotion in the blink of an eye, no speed bumps in between, and they have trouble operating in 4, 5, and 6, I always look for trauma, because a right-sized emotional reaction tends to be a more flexible mid-range. It fluctuates, but it doesn't go through from one extreme to the other. And that's very tough on relationships and families.
What is the divorce rate?
You know, there aren't statistics that I'm aware of how many ACOAs get divorced more frequently. There aren't endless statistics on ACOAs.
But there are statistics that say about 50% of ACOAs marry alcoholics.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a very large number.
Very, and conservative again. Conservative again. Marry alcoholics.
So the marriage may be set up for failure from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's set up for more, if not failure, without a doubt, tougher relating. A lot more fighting, a lot more, emotional distress than there might be otherwise. ACOAs carry burdens of pain.
Well, here I think, like anything else, if you actually go after the root cause and treat it and deal with it, you're likely going to be able to do something about this and beat it.
You know,
but a lot of times we go into denial. Yeah.
Yeah, I look at this all the time and just think, if only these people would have gone to Al-Anon and to therapy in time, this marriage would have been fine. This family could have stayed together. This person could have opened up about what they're carrying inside themselves. And ACOAs also, when you say denial, can become defensive about looking at themselves, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I see this often even in my own field. I'm a bariatric surgeon, and I take care of people who are quite obese and have eating disorders. And myself, I was a binge eater for many years, and I know that there's a strong correlation between that and trauma as a child. And, of course, that's one of the many compulsive behaviors that can develop as adults from having this type of trauma. Tell us a little bit about eating disorders related to this.
Well, you probably know as much as I do on this, but it emotional eating is really feeding your feelings is one of the quickest ways to medicate the whole dopamine connection. That when we're eating a lot of sugar and white flour, we're not just soothing ourselves; we're actually stimulating our brain to produce more dopamine. So we're chemically addicted, but to our own bodies. And if you watch somebody who's eating in this manner, you'll see an anxious feeling, and then you'll see the hand reach for the kind of food that will stimulate dopamine. And it's like a dose kind of reaction. This much food will stimulate this much dopamine, and then I will feel better. So feeling management through food and overeating I see it all the time, as you do.
Mm-hmm. And once again, that's due to the root causes, which in this case is the trauma as a child from having an alcoholic parent or an addicted parent, and having that disconnection. And until you actually deal with that issue, it continues to be a problem, lead to your compulsive behavior, despite anything you do, even surgery.
Yeah.
So I admit that. So.
The bariatric surgery doesn't always help. I see that too.
Yeah, it's only a tool. It's only a tool, and then you have to actually go after the root causes, and that's kind of one of the things that I really make sure that people understand. And it's important. You're bringing this up here with other compulsive behaviors because they can be affected in many other ways as well, right? They can gambling and even they can be alcoholics themselves, correct?
Be alcoholics themselves. Sexual addiction is huge these days. Huge because of the internet. There's a big explosion of sex addicts. Eating, as you say, I see a lot of that, and I correlate a lot of in my practice eating with sexual abuse as well. Some form of sexual abuse. It seems
very common. Very common.
You find that
well.
too? Yeah.
Yes. Now, you come to a crossroads at some point in your life where you have decided whether to continue or break the pain chain. How do you do that? I mean, what do you do when you come to that crossroads?
I would say the first thing to do is find an Al-Anon meeting or an ACOA meeting and go to 6 at least before you decide you don't like sitting there and listening to all these stories. And just don't worry about saying anything. Don't worry about doing anything. Just listen. Listen to the stories that people are sharing and see what comes up in you when you listen. And go with an open mind and go with the intention of healing. And let yourself go through the uncomfortable phase, which can last for many months, expect to be disquieted with the feelings that come up. But the good news is, as you share feelings, cry about them, think about them again, observe your childhood feelings as you talk about them through your adult mind, you start to heal them. So even though it's a disturbing phase, because you're unearthing a lot of old pain, it's very relieving as well. And you'll start to feel the relief pretty soon, but stick with it and don't expect it to be easy. And get all the support you need. If you need a one-to-one therapist, I'm a group therapist, so I'm very big on group therapy. But I'm very big on 12-step programs.
What do you do about self-sabotage that invariably it's going to come? What do you do
a variety of things. You know, self-discipline is not a dirty word for one thing. And develop the understanding, I guess, in clients that you can work through a certain amount of the pain, but you don't want to work. You don't want to work the pain. You want to be able to feel it and heal it, but not live in it. So when you live in it, it's hard not to sabotage yourself because the pain keeps coming up, and rather than if you have the intention of healing it and understanding what went on with you, you have some choices you can make as to new behaviors, and very much a behavior program too. Not just feeling the feelings and talking about them, but changing in behavior, change in habits. And self-sabotaging we all do, but I think the longer you stay with this and the healthier you get, the less you want to self-sabotage because you come to respect yourself and love this new way of being.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And you're gaining self-confidence with time, and that builds up self-esteem as time goes on.
Yeah. It's cumulative, but it takes time.
Now, what do you use as a parenting example since you didn't have a good example yourself when you were growing up?
Well, I had all kinds of examples, but I guess, in other words, my parents did well and badly at the same time. I think it's very important when you're healing this not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. None of us come from no strength, and it's important to identify what helped you, where you developed your strengths, and feel good about those. I have grandparents who were very wonderful and really stood there as a resource. Church helped me a lot. I changed schools. I went from a private school to a public school. I got a job, so I got several jobs, so I felt independent. I felt like I could do something to change my life. That was very important for me. And then parenting classes, books, watch other parents. The world is loaded with information. So I think, and forgiveness. I'm kind of big on forgiveness too. People.
Well, that takes time, but I absolutely agree that that's something you eventually have to come to terms with and learn to forgive, or you'll never move on.
Well, you said it succinctly. You just stay stuck in that resentment place.
Dr. Dayton, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, the book is called The Acoa Trauma Syndrome, and you can find it on Amazon and other bookstores, and or on her website, which is www.tiandayton.com. Thanks again, Dr. Dayton.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Up next, the million-dollar question. What do women want? We will attempt to answer it when the Dr. A Show continues.